Every once in a while, you'll get some artwork that's simply a little more complex to mock up than simply putting it into perspective and changing a blending mode. In this case, I want to take this logo and put it on a variety of different surfaces that have different colors, but I also want to change the color of my logo to match the needs of the mock-up. So if I was to simply put this on top of the design, and again, we'll make a smart object out of that layer, I could get rid of the white by changing its blending mode to multiply. But that doesn't let me really change the color of my logo. In order to do this, we need to change the color of the original artwork that's here. So since I've got this saved as a smart object layer, I can double click on it, and this will open up my artwork in its own separate file. To change the color of the artwork, there's a couple of different ways we could do this. The first and simplest way is to simply do a color adjustment. With the artwork selected, I can go up to Image, down to Adjustments, and I can do something like a hue and saturation adjustment. With hue and saturation turned on, this allows me to change the hue of everything that's on here. Now in this case, since it's only one color, it's easy enough to slide it to the color that I want. And I can even turn on the word colorize and dial in exactly the saturation, lightness, and darkness that I need. However, but notice that sometimes it'll pick up on some other colors as well. So playing around with this, you really need to be aware of what you want it to do. In this case, I can change it to be a nice red. We'll say OK to this. Now when I save my artwork and jump back into my original, you can see that it's easily fits inside of this area as a red logo that I've gotten rid of it. The other thing I need to do is change it to yellow and put it on the red background. Now when I do this and I open up my artwork, if I was to change this to yellow, let's do the same thing again by doing a hue and saturation and bring it over to the yellow side. Let's again dial in what we need. If I was to save this and put it in here, it's still not showing up. Well, the reason it's not showing up is simply because the blending mode of multiply isn't going to show the colors that I have. So if I change the color from this, blending it with multiply to get rid of the white isn't going to work because yellow is also a lighter color. What I need to do is to open up my blend options for this layer to get rid of the white. To do that, go down to your effects with the layer selected and open up your blend options. This will change your layer style. And with blend options selected, let's change the blend if for this layer to get rid of the white. So pull this to the left and automatically you can see it gets rid of those lighter colors. Now if I go too far, it'll obviously get rid of the entire yellow, but I'm going to hold down my Option or Alt key and dial in exactly what I want from here. And that's starting to look pretty good with that. We'll say OK. So that works well for this. But let's say I wanted to turn my artwork completely white. Now if I was to go in, so let's again open up our artwork and make this white, this would change all of my design to a solid white, and I couldn't get rid of it. I want to keep just the colors of the Mississippi College, the letters white, and I want to change the color of the background. In order to do this, what I like to do is to do a gradient map adjustment. Here's a way to do that. Instead of going up to Layer, go to your Adjustments panel and choose Gradient Map down here at the bottom. This is going to add a separate layer to your Layers panel, and what the gradient map does is it looks at the dark and light pixels inside of your artwork and it changes it to whatever color you have selected. In this case, the darker pixels were the yellow that's on here, and it's changing it to white, or excuse me, to black or a shade of gray, and the lighter pixels were white and it's keeping them white. Here's the advantage. Let's double click on our Properties panel of the gradient, and this will open this up. So let's say I wanted to change this background color to blue. Since the background color is light, which is this swatch over here, I can double click on the swatch, and change it to whatever color I need it to be. In this case, I can change it blue. In my case, I want to change my color of my artwork or the letters to solid white. So I'm going to double click on my darker swatch, change it to white, and for now it's erased away. But let's change our lighter swatch to black, and essentially I've inversed the colors that we see. We'll say OK to this. To make them even brighter white, I can click on this and this will change the gradient down to here. So that's looking pretty good with that. And we'll say OK. Now when I save my artwork and jump back into my original, let's see if we can fix our design. Remember, when you open up the blending options, we got rid of the lighter pixels. In this case, it was the white behind it. In this case, it's now getting rid of that for the artwork. Let's reset the whiter side and change the blend diff on the darker side by clicking on it and dragging out to get rid of the darker pixels. And this way I can see the white of the logo and get rid of the black of the background. And we'll say OK to that. So you can see how changing this up does depend a little bit on what kind of background you have and what the artwork looks like. Sometimes it's easier to just change the blending mode. Sometimes you actually have to go in and recolor the artwork and change up the blending options within the artwork itself. An even more difficult task would be doing something that has light and dark on its surface. Let's do the same for this soda can. So I've got an artwork layer, and we're going to change the artwork again to a smart object, and let's scale it down and get it to fit inside of this soda can. So very quickly I'm going to resize it. Let's zoom in so I can see what I'm working with. And I'm going to turn down the opacity so I can see the artwork and the soda can itself. Now the artwork needs to look like it's wrapping around here. So I'm going to go up to Edit, Transform. Let's do a warp distortion so I can put it into a bent style of design. So I'm going to bend it around this way. Again, I can do the same at the bottom. I can warp that bottom edge so that it looks like it's going around that edge there. And I think that'll work for what we're doing. We'll bring the opacity back up to 100%. To get it to stay inside of the can, I'm going to go to my background layer and let's select the can itself. I think my quick selection tool will allow me to click and drag over the can very quickly and easily. You can see I've got it all selected. With the selection still selected, I can return to my artwork layer and then go up to Layer and turn on a layer mask that reveals the selection, reveals selection. And this will clip it off inside of my can area. In order to show the highlights and shadows of the can, if we were to change the blending mode to multiply, it's not really going to show very much. Or to color burn, well, that doesn't look real enough because the highlights don't look real. Even screen or overlay isn't going to give you the best results. Really, there's no blending mode that's going to give you good results to work with. What we want to do is to create our own highlights and shadows. So in this case, I'm going to set my blending mode for the artwork back to normal, and let's create a new layer that we can paint on our own highlights and a new layer for our shadows. Let's do the highlights first. Go into our layers panel. I'm going to create a new layer and call it our highlights layer. This layer needs to stay inside of our artwork layer. So whatever we paint only stays inside of the artwork that we've got clipped. To do that, let's create a clipping mask out of our highlights layer. So I'm going to go up to my layers panel and choose Create Clipping Mask. Notice it points inside of that layer. With that done, since these are highlights, I'm going to choose my paintbrush tool and choose a brush that's a soft round brush. And I'm going to set my opacity pretty low, about 15 to 20%. Now, wherever I paint white as my fill color, it will brighten up that particular area and stay inside of there. And I can turn off the visibility for my artwork and see where those highlights may lie. So I need to paint a good highlight here, a little bit of a highlight right there. Let's do the same thing now for some shadows on my can. Go into our layers. Let's create a new layer. This will be our shadow layer. Again, we need this to be a clipped mask, so let's choose our options and create a clipping mask to clip it inside of our artwork. And since these shadows are going to be darker, let's set the blending mode to be multiply. And we're going to swap our color over to be black. Now wherever I paint inside of our can, let me zoom in, it'll automatically blend with those colors and give it some darker shadows on the edge. To further refine this, if you want, you can go into your shadows and adjust the opacity, making it lighter or darker by making it more or less opaque. And on the highlights, I can adjust the opacity of those to be lighter or darker. And if you want, you can change their blending mode to be something like screen, and that will screen in the colors that you have for those. Now I've got a can that looks like it's in 3 dimensions, and it fits well inside of the contours because I had to create my own shadows and my own highlights to blend in on top of the can. Again, once these are done, you would save them up as a Photoshop document so that you can place whatever artwork you want inside of that layer.